we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever want to reach out to the podcast, let us know if you want to hear about a topic, or you wanted to join us here on the episode itself, or anything like that, any reason at all. Hit us up at the Bigmark Pod or at the Bigmark Podcast in the DMs. You know, drop a comment, whatever you want. Let's get a conversation going in the comments, and like I said, hit us up in the DMs too if you need. Like I always say, a lot of people who have joined us here on the podcast as a guest have reached out that way, and I'd love to have you on. Like I always say, it's not that I don't want you on. It's just I always do these things where it's like I want people to come on, but I don't know if they want to come on. Anyway, it's a whole thing. Some people are nervous. It's actually funny enough. I'll get to that later on about getting on podcasts. No matter how much they speak to people, it's a different vibration. I totally get it. Not everyone wants to have all their thoughts on wax. So, except me, apparently. But anyway, again, thank you all for being here. First and foremost, it's the best way you could possibly support the podcast is by checking us out and watching and listening. However you are. Thank you for taking the time out to join us and hear our stories here. That's again the best way to support the podcast. But also hit the likes, hit the subscribes, make sure you're following along. And then if you did want to go that extra mile too, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. We got a couple different ways you can support and donate there. So thank you all for being here. And I'm excited to talk about today because I'm fresh off coming back from the conference and excited to talk about it. I was at the MBAA conference, the 2026 annual MBAA Master Brewers Association of America. And of course we're talking about beer brewers specifically, but all the brewers that are getting together. I mean, I think maybe some distillers might show up, but these are all the people that I work with where I work at, the company I work at, Escarpment Laboratories. We make brewers yeast. We make the yeast that makes beer, and it's super exciting and super fun. And I've been there for over 3 years now and been loving every minute of it. But believe it or not, this is my first conference I've actually been with them. I am on the sales team at Escarpment Labs, but I am more of a in-house kind of guy dealing with orders and making sure things are going in and out. So I'm usually on site. But it was nice to be able to come out because we actually had simultaneous conferences going on this weekend. There was also the Pink Boots Conference, which is a super fun program and initiative that's put on by the Pink Boots Society, which is supporting women in the brewing industry, which is super awesome. And there's specific strains of hops and yeast and malt that have been chosen by the association. And anyone who wants to brew a Pink Boots anyone who wants to brew a Pink Boots beer can get a hold of us for the Pink Boots yeast, and then the other companies that have the Pink Boots malt and the Pink Boots hops, and then you can have a Pink Boots sponsored yeast, and usually the sales of those beers, there's a portion of the sales going as a donation to the Pink Boots Society. So again, super great, and that was also happening. So Shelly and Nicole from Escarpment Labs were out there representing big time, so that was super fun. And then myself, the two owners, Richard Priest and Angus Ross, and then Cole Racecums, who's head of our laboratory, who is been in the brewing industry for forever. So he knew a bunch of people there, and it was his first conference as well. So super lucky to go with that crew. It was excellent, great balance of guys, and also a few former, one former Escarpment Labs employee, but then a couple other guys that are working very closely with the lab. I mean, I've talked about Escarpment Labs a lot, but we're involved in a lot of yeast research as well. I mean, that's how all the guys got started, and Richard is like one of the top minds in yeast right now in yeast science. So I feel sometimes like, you know, when I was first coming into the job too, like, you know, I learned really fast that, you know, within the world of yeast science, these guys are a big deal, and I'm super proud and lucky to be a part of that team. And you see that at the conferences too. I mean, Richard is the president of the MBAA, so I mean, he is making a lot of things, but making a lot of moves that way, and he's part of a larger network that way. But again, just being from Scarman Labs and people coming up and asking us questions and stuff, and feeling like we're able to answer those questions really, really well, and I always say, of course, to use as many big words as possible and ameliorate people's concerns, and make sure that they're feeling confident about their brews, because again, brewing is a science, yes, but it also is an art, and sometimes fate likes to fuck with the outcomes, and things change, and you want to try to make sure your brews are as bulletproof as possible, and there's ways to do that, and there's science-backed ways to do that. So really interesting. Apparently so there's like talks during this conference, right? It's a 2-day thing. We went down, it was in Kingston, Ontario this year, the Holiday Inn, on Princess downtown, right on the water there. Super nice, actually. It was Thursday, so went down Wednesday night. Thursday was conference all day. You get a little breakfast, but then there's a bunch of talks. So there's like people from all over the brewing industry, from equipment to ingredients to techniques, all these different things. There's talks all day long. I mean, I was manning the booth and in and out, helping around a little bit more with things during some of those talks, with the Scarman Labs type things during our talks. But all of a sudden, it's kind of like one of these things where, you kind of think about these things like it's a networking thing, and then obviously you want to be able to create an environment where people feel comfortable to ask you questions too, because it's a big conference, right? People are always around. Not everyone is super talkative, let's just put it that way. Yet everyone wants to know some of this information. So sometimes it's a tough thing, right? Like I consider myself extroverted, or at least willing to cross some of those thresholds in the social atmosphere. And when I want to know something, usually I'll especially in an environment that promotes questions, I'm going to try to ask as soon as I can. If not in the group environment, maybe I'll try to pull the person aside, right? So there's a lot of, how should I say this? There's a lot of, I'm trying to just put myself in the position essentially of someone who would be wanting to learn some information and scared to ask, right? So, and it's happened before. I'm not saying I've never felt that before, but again, that idea of like, you're at a conference, this is where everyone's talking. It's like, if you've got questions, come up and ask. But if not, it's tough, right? So you want to create this inviting atmosphere, and you want to make sure that it's somehow inviting. Like I said, it's inviting to people, and you want to do that. So I think, like I said, we had a great balance of people to do that, and no one was afraid to come up and talk to us for most things. And I was lucky enough to be able to sit into a couple talks, and there was a great talk by this guy Matt. I wish. I'm just gonna look it up real quick, because it was a great talk, and I can definitely find his name. So he did his talk, I believe it was yesterday in the afternoon, which was great. And his name is Matt Phillip, and he came from We Can Drink Together, which again he was in bringing the knowledge and the techniques and the history behind the ergonomics of beer. So again, people wanting to move kegs and all these things, there's a lot of heavy lifting, right? When it comes to when it comes to beer, right? Whether it's in kegs, whether you're hauling hoses around, there's a lot of heavy lifting. Even if you're working a bar and there's people around, or there's you have your keg room where you have to move kegs around, and it's usually, and Matt made this great point, is that most of the times where fucking kegs are in like the greasiest place at the bar, like they're like tucked away. People are like, they treat them like they're like hazardous waste almost in some bars. Like honestly, this one bar I used to go to was like, it was in a fucking dungeon, and like there was like all, and you have to like be like hauling this thing around. And anyway, talked about the history of like barrels, wooden barrels. That's how beer was mostly stored, were in these wooden barrels. And we made this move towards stainless steel, actually because of like pencil pusher motherfuckers, which I'll get to in a second. But essentially the history was, these people, well, originally when they designed the barrel, it was designed to be rolled. That's the whole thing. It's not meant to be lifted because it's fucking heavy as fuck. So the idea is like, if you're going to lift it, it's at least with more than one person. No one's fucking hauling this thing by itself, but you can roll a barrel really easily. And in fact, you can actually roll a barrel end over end too. Like when you push the barrel, and I mean, I don't know about full barrels, but you can do this with empty ones. Where if you just like, imagine a barrel sitting flat top on the bottom, flat top, right? You're just looking at a normal barrel sitting there. If you like pushed it over, just tipped it over, it would roll end over end because just the design of it and the way it goes, you just have to kind of like help it out, but it goes like ka-kung, 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 like you just like roll this bitch around. It's fucking wild. And you can like spin it if you want to move it too. You can like spin it and it like rolls on. But again, everything is, you're using mechanical advantage to move the thing around, right? So, and like I said, even if they and he was showing us, Matt was showing us images about like, the fucking way everything was built was that it was rolled. There was rails around, like wooden rails, and they didn't have to necessarily be metal, but rails around that you roll the fucking thing on. All the carts were low, so you're just like rolling it up. No one's lifting these fucking things. If anyone's lifting it, it's just the cooper, who is the person who makes the barrels. So if anyone's named Cooper or last name is Cooper, they make fucking barrels. So that was a big part of the history. And then these pencil pusher motherfuckers were the guys who were kind of just overseeing all the work being done. No one, and just kind of saying like, why are there so many, like back in the day, before a lot of industrial revolutionary type shit, there was just a lot of people working at these breweries. Like we're talking about like in a modern brewery, you might have 5 people working in the back. We're talking about like having 75 people back there, like just around. Some guys might be chilling, but like when shit needs to be done, it's done. You're never like, I need a hand with this thing, and no one's around, right? So when those workforces started to shrink, people had to do things more on their own. So yes, we have mechanical advantages for a lot of things, but that was one of the things that kind of started going by the wayside, oddly enough, when it came to beer. And then they said, hey, we can start making these kegs out of stainless steel, and they're almost indestructible, and we can keep reusing them. We just fill them and all this shit or clean them and keep going, right? And we don't need these wooden barrels that sometimes fall apart and sometimes leak, and we have to keep building them and keep all these coopers employed and do this, that, and the third. So we're wasting trees. I mean, yeah, it's wood too, don't get me wrong, but these stainless steel kegs that they eventually did bring in, which we're talking right now about the standard 50-liter keg, which is like what most people would see in the bar. A lot of craft beers come in 30 liters. They're taller and smaller, but even then, lifting a keg and moving these metal kegs around without any mechanical advantage is quite difficult. And there was like some ergonomic biomechanical calculations that Matt was showing us about like how much strain, because again, essentially the kind of curve that happens when you're repetitively lifting something heavy, it's not really kind of it's a linear drop off. There's not just like a plateau and then all of a sudden, you've lifted the 10th. Now you've lifted the thing 10 times. If you lift it one more time, then you're going to injure yourself. It's not really like that. It kind of is like diminishing returns. You can't really predict when you might get injured, but also your strength falls off over and over use, and then your mechanics go off, your body posture goes off, and then risk of injury increases, right? And he was talking a lot about a lot of brewers have back problems. And it's not surprising because we're lifting these kegs that are out in front of us, and it's like outside of our center of gravity, and it's just fucking awkward and wet sometimes, and you're slipping and you're doing this all. So it's a fucking dangerous thing. There's hoses around, you can trip on potentially, and even again, like I said, these keg rooms, even in breweries, are usually tightly packed with all these fucking kegs, and you're like lifting at weird angles and twisting, and your feet get caught. So it's pretty fucking dicey. And these calculations basically showed that you can only lift a 50-liter stainless steel keg once every 8 hours if you want to repetitively, quote unquote, repetitively lift a keg. You're only lifting that bitch once a shift. That's it. one person, one keg. So like if you wanted to like we were talking about having all these employees in the back, if you wanted to move 100 kegs, you would have to, in 8 hours, you would have to employ 100 people. So this is what we're talking about here. It's not good. I fucking was a keg delivery man, and don't get me wrong, I had 30-liter kegs. There was some 50s, but mostly 30s. And I fucking lifted a lot more than 1 per 8 hour. I lifted 8 in 1 hour at least. And again, there were 30 liters, and sometimes I'd lift 2 at a time. Now, what did help with that is it actually did bring the weight closer to my center of mass, which is good. Center of gravity, center of mass, which is much, it's kind of how your spine is built to handle loads, are when they're like apart, carried closer to your center of mass. So again, backpacks, lifting things on your shoulder. Again, your shoulder's right over your center of mass. That's why you have a lot of power when you can put shit on your shoulder. Or, that's why, people in tribes fucking carry shit on their fucking heads, because you can carry a tremendous amount of weight up there. I mean, your neck has to be strong as well. But like that load goes right through your spine, through your hips, down to your knees, down to your ankles, into the ground. And you can handle a lot of that shit when it's all in line. But as soon as you can literally measure, as soon as it's like centimeters away from your center of mass and you keep going up further and further, the risk of injury just goes, because you're like starting to bend your spine in trippy ways. So anyway, it was really cool. I thought he did a great job. Unfortunately, it was like most talks kind of hurried at the end, and then a bunch of people were going on to a fucking brewery tour after, so some people had to dip after, but apparently that tour was sick. But anyway, I was super, super excited to see that, because again, even at work, we do a lot of shit that is lifting heavy shits. Like we have these carboys that we store our yeast in, and they're 20 kilos each. So they're pretty fucking heavy. It's like 44 pounds or something like that, 45 pounds, 50 pounds of liquid weight too, right? So it's not actually even dead if you look at it a certain way. I mean, yeah, it's pretty dead. But we're basically, me and my buddy who are doing the majority of the packaging of the yeast, are basically doing fucking farmers carries all the fucking day. Our shoulders should be jacked. So, again, it's kind of one of those things where, repetitive moves. And I actually noticed over December, because I was doing all the packaging, because my buddy took the month off. I was doing it all, and I felt my shoulder was fucked up, and I was like, why the hell is my shoulder so sore? And then it kind of dawned on me. I was like, shit, I was doing all the packaging. And again, when the way we do it is we're pouring into from one jug into another jug, essentially, and you're like lifting up, and you're shrugging, and you're holding it, and you're watching the weight. So you're like doing this like fine motor movement, but you're fucking using a lot of strength to do it, right? So it was interesting approach and interesting look. And again, with my kin degree and stuff, it was all right there. And I love, at least what I studied in school. It was exciting to see some of that, applied to the beer industry too, right? Because, I've kind of taken most of my like physiology that I learned in school and applied it to yeast, because the yeast cell isn't too far away from the human cell. But the ergonomics of things are really interesting, especially because, I've been thinking about it a lot. Like, fuck, man, I'm not really built for like a laborious, menial, repetitive, like heavy working job. I mean, sadly enough, what in Matt's presentation, he basically said there's a reason why a lot of brewers are big, burly guys, is because if you're bigger and taller and like more skeletal mass, you can actually handle more weight. And it is fucking true. Like, most of the guys I know that are uber strong, like really strong, I know guys that are jacked that are little, but I mean like literally strong that can move shit. They're on the taller side. Like, they're not short, but we're talking about 6 foot plus. And, again, above average height. And again, so you start to see that, and I was like, fuck, I can't be like, I'm too big, like I shouldn't be moving. It's like, nah, man, you're a Clydesdale, and you got to fucking accept that. So, but it can only go so far, damn it. Anyway, so super interesting. I'm really looking forward to potentially talking about that. Richard and I did a couple podcasts when we were on the fly. So the old Escarpment Labs podcast was rocking, and it was in full force. And we did our first couple guests. We had Eugene Fletcher, who is a former Escarpment Labs employee, who's the man. He's a doctor at Dr. Eugene Fletcher, professor at Carleton University. So he came down from Ottawa, which was super nice, and got to talk to him about some of his lab evolved yeast and some of the stuff he's working on, because he helped us out with many of our strains that we have today. And I worked with him for a little bit, and then he got the nod up to the big leagues, so he's killing it. Shout out to Eugene and the fam. And then we had our second guest ever, which again was it's funny, you know. I was saying this to Richard too, you know. It's like I was so used to just him and I doing our podcast that it's kind of funny, you know, hearing someone else's voice in the mics. So I was like kind of being producer extraordinaire, which was fun. I fucking actually really enjoyed that. I would honestly like to pursue that. I think I'd be really good at it in the sense of I kind of know what it's like to be on this side of the mic. I'd also like to be on the other and look up shit and be the Jamie to the Rogan kind of thing. But it was fun sitting there. We had a cool little meeting room. But we also had Jessica Young on as a guest as well, and she was great. She's doing her PhD in hop creep, which is, again, every time you hear when people are doing their PhDs in something in brewing, it's always like, it sounds like you're doing your PhD in like jelly candies. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like in gummy bears. It's like, I'm doing my PhD in like flavors and like, you know, beer flavor kind of thing. Like I'm doing my PhD in like, you know, how tasty malt is. It's like, I'm not denigrating at all. I'm just saying it's so interesting when you start to hear people's focuses. It's not like I'm doing my PhD in, you know, liver enzyme research or something, or I'm doing my PhD in like gut health and like the enzymes in the colon or whatever. Who the fuck knows? I'm gonna keep talking about enzymes. I kept hearing that all weekend. But the zymes, apparently enzyme in the Latin derivative means from yeast, which is interesting. So I guess in the early research, people thought that enzymes only came from yeast, which who knows. Anyway, it was super, super fun doing that, and stayed for a couple nights at the hotel, chilled out, went out for the first night. We had actually a guest come in from Las Vegas, and Richard drove him down from London, but Joe Kutzo from Huddle Brewing Company in Las Vegas, he came all the way up, joined us, and we went out night before, had a little fun, not too crazy. I didn't know what to expect, right? Like it being a beer conference, if it was going to be like a heavy drinking situation, but not too bad. And then the second night, there was like a beer stube at the end of the night, and it was like, you know, everyone just had all these beers that they brought, put it in buckets, and it was super fun. And you know, it's kind of one of these things where you never know what to expect sometimes with these brewers, but it was super fun. Everyone was in good spirits, and I don't know what came over me. It was probably the couple beers I had at the stube. I decided to go work out because I gotta fucking do it. And my buddy Barrett, who was there, is doing his PhD in yeast science as well. He said he got to work out at like 4 a.m. that day. So I'm like, fuck, man, I got to catch up. So super fun. Again, super fun. Tomas was there as well. Tomas Fisher. He was the other former Escarpment Labs employee that was there, and he's doing his same research on terpenes and yeast and stuff like that. So super great to see all these guys rocking and rolling. And put a lot of faces to the names. You know, I'm usually dealing with people through email, and it's really fun to actually see the people who I talk to, right? So, if you're listening, it was great to see you. Spread the love, spread the word. If you're a fan of the Escarpment Labs podcast, you might be a fan of the Bigmark podcast too. We got lots of episodes to go check out if you want to go back and binge it. So anyway. Thank y'all for listening. It was a great conference. Thanks to the boys for bringing me. Can't wait to see you back at work, back at school. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. Love y'all. See you next week.